Hello and welcome back to Hegel on the beach. Hegel's had to move away from the beach to the marina because it's a bit windy today and the tripod kept on falling over. Okay, so let's get this done before it falls over completely. So this is number 7, Hegel's Phenomenology of Mind, and we're looking at perceiving, or the thing and illusion. In the previous lecture we'd said that sense certainty tries to grasp the immediate. It fails because the immediate turns out to be complex. Here, right now, turns to be, depending on my perspective, there. And day eventually turns into night. And sense certainty also has 2 parts. It's the object that we grasp and there's the I part of it. But as I said at the end of the last video, what is this I that tries to grasp the immediate? And the immediate consists of objects that have got multiple properties. One of the things is the I of sense certainty can't be specific about what I means. And sense certainty and the perception that we're going to come to, they are both kind of passive mediums. They're not like actively doing things with the world. Perception by its nature is a rather passive thing. So 111, paragraph 111. Immediate certainty does not take hold of the truth, for its truth is the universal, but it does want to take hold of the this. On the other hand, perception takes what to perception is the existence as universal. As universality is perception's principle per se. Its moments, which are immediately self-differentiating within it, are also universal, namely I universal and the object universal. Harris says this: the perceiving we are concerned with is a process in which the universal self takes itself to be a rational being and the truth or its object to be a universal truth. So we're going to see a lot of universals, not particulars, in this section. 111, continued. For us, this is Hegel now. In itself, the universal is, as the principle, the essence of perceiving. The universal is the essence of perceiving. And in contrast to this abstraction, both of the distinguished moments, namely the perceiving and the perceived, are the inessential. However, both are in fact the universal or the essence. Both are essential. So the inessential and essential, which is a bit confusing. Okay, so Harris says this as a means of explanation again. We, the philosophers, perceive both the act and the fact of perception, or take it truly as it objectively is. While the perceiving act perceives only its object, it knows that the object is a universal essence, but it doesn't know that the universality is an activity of the perceiving mind. Our perceiving is the process of which the object is the result. Perception as a whole, perception as our object, is an interpretation of sense certainty, in which the knowing consciousness is no longer concerned about the truth of the copula is just a copula, but about what is. The formula of perception generally is not this is, but this thing is. So it is the activity of interpreting the thing that is our object. Again, that's like I think he's made that more difficult than it really is. For the perceiving consciousness, the objective thing, not its own subject of interpreting, is the essence. 112, this is Hegel now. Since the object's principle, the universal, is in its simplicity a mediated simplicity, the object must express this on its own as its nature, and thereby shows itself to be a thing of many properties. The wealth of sensuous knowing belongs to perception, not to immediate certainty. Okay, things have many properties, and that real sensuous knowing, real immediate knowing is to do with perception. I think that's what it's about. Okay, next one. Harris says, only perception can say what is, because it names universal things that are perceived through the changing sequence and variety of their properties. The object of perception is the oneness of the many. Okay, so we name things. Perception's about, we're naming things. The lake, the bush, the clouds, the sun. It names universals. Sheep, goats or whatever, okay? It's not this goat, it's goats in general, it's universals it's concerned with. 113, this is Hegel. The sensuous is there by itself still present, but not as it is supposed to be in the immediate certainty, yeah? But instead as the universal, or as that which is determined to be a property. And we'll talk more about properties. The sublation exhibits its truly double meaning, something that which we already have seen in the negative, and it's now a negating and at the same time a preserving. Many such properties are posited at the same time, and each one is the negative of the other. However, the many are in their determinateness simply universal. The salt is simply here and is at the same time manifold, many. It is white and also tart, also cubically shaped, also of a particular weight, etc. All of these many properties are in one simple here, in which they also permeate each other. None is a different here from the others, rather each is everywhere in the same here as are the others. At the same time, without being separated by way of the various heres, they do not affect one another in this permeation. The white does not affect or alter the cubic shape. So in the example of salt, which he uses, Hegel explains why perception moves us towards a universal conception of salt. So, or objects, salt's everywhere, not just one particular grain of salt on my finger. It's salt that you and I know to be salt when we look at it adding to the food. So this must be the this and the universal this, so it's both. This is what perception means, this new perspective or new form of experience doesn't do away entirely with the notion of the this and the now. And we mentioned before about preserving them, these fancy words. It means it preserves them, or that's what the word sublate, it sublates them. So sublation means it just preserves them. It overcomes the problem by preserving and going beyond the problem. Perception is the next more complex form of consciousness, and it makes sense of sense certainty. And it turns it into, it's not common sense, but it makes it more accessible, I think. Because otherwise you go mad trying to think of individual, like in this nominalist world of everything as its own individual, tiny little existence, not related to anything else. And all our experiences are like that, supposedly, but that's clearly perception saying no. If we take any object we see in everyday life, they all contain multiple properties. Objects are individual entities made up of many properties, but there's still one, singular, unique, and separate. And this section is about the one and the many. If you look at the online Stanford philosophy is something it's called, yeah? The definition of the one and the many, it's summed up nicely in relation to the example of a cloud. So it's a lovely sunny day and we see a single cloud. Okay, can we see a single cloud? No, we can't really. We see loads of clouds here. Okay, but we see a single cloud in the sky. But when we zoom in, we see that the cloud is made up of billions of individual droplets. The cloud seems to have a clear boundary from the ground, but when we look closer, we see that the boundary is blurred and indeterminate. Yeah? So, how are the one and the many linked together? So when we look at the cloud, we see it's soft, it's white, it's shaped like a bubble, it's moist and so on. And these properties aren't unique and particular because otherwise we couldn't make sense of the world. We couldn't think of clouds in general. I know we could only really think of one particular cloud. We wouldn't even be able to name what a cloud is because the properties that inhere in the cloud would be different in every single case. But we keep seeing whiteness and softness and moistness reoccur in other clouds. And the whiteness and the softness and the moistness of the clouds, they can't exist independently. Otherwise, it'd be impossible to relate our friend to the clouds of the sky. You couldn't relate everything if everything has its individual properties. Therefore, it might not be impossible, but it's not meaningful in any sense. There's something, and that's what experience is about, the science of the consciousness of experience is about trying to make sense of our experiences. So there's something about this cloud that holds the whiteness and the softness together. And so perception is an expression of the need for universals like whiteness and softness. We need these universals to make sense of the world, or to stop the world from being a jumble of individual sensory experiences, each one different. And if we experience the world like this, as unconnected with the last sensory experience, it just wouldn't be meaningful if we had to have every experience was kind of like unconnected to the last. We wouldn't actually, I don't think we'd actually exist, because you couldn't connect any experience you had to the last one. So the cloud is unique in the way that it combines and gathers together these universal properties. But things like clouds aren't just a random collection of many properties. We're back to the kind of the age-old concept of the one and the many. Again, and they seem to be, I won't say it's cross-cultural, but the one and the many turns up in China, India, ancient Greece, and so on, and even today. So we need an idea of one to keep the many together. Otherwise, as I said before, we've got random properties that happen to be fortuitously collided together at a certain time. So why is a thing and not just an accidental or chance collection of arbitrary properties? So why is something this and not that? Why is it a this at all? And perception begs the question, does the one come before the many, or does the many come before the one? Are the multiple properties of the object in the object, or is the unity of the object in me? Am I doing the unifying when I do this? Is the cloud something that I've made? Is something that's got no existence other than what I give it? Is it an indeterminate collection of stuff that only I, in my wisdom, is able to make sense of? So another example would be in Spain, when the conquistadores went to Central America or South America. This might not be true, but I think I heard it somewhere, that they thought that a horse and a man, when they first saw the Spanish, because they didn't know horses weren't native to Central America and South America, they thought it was one thing. So they created an idea initially of a human horse creature, which didn't exist. Of course, they were very quickly disabused of that notion when the rider got off the horse, but originally that idea was in their head. That's my read. That's my understanding of what when somebody first saw a horse and a rider together. Okay, moving on. Okay, 114. An aspect arises which must also be taken into consideration. If the many determinate properties were to be utterly indifferent and were for all intents and purposes related only to themselves, then they would still not be determinate properties, for they are determinate properties only insofar as they both differentiate themselves from each other and relate themselves to each other as opposites. And again, this is a bit more, Hegelianese, but Harris says this: the thing is not just a loose collection of properties inhering somehow in the same sensible, identifiable region of space at a given time. It's a thing because of what it excludes, and its exclusiveness is what particularizes each of its properties. So the whiteness and saltiness are bonded into the thing, this one thing here and now, and the properties each exist in the context of a universal range that they must exclude and negate in order to be determinate. So if it's white, it can't be black. So 115. These moments, all taken together, the thing, as the truth of perception, reaches its culmination. According to the aspect in which these differences belong to the individual medium, the differences are themselves universal. Each relates itself only to itself, and they do not affect each other. So some properties don't affect other properties. Harris says, if we are to perceive what a thing is, we must be able to identify some defining characteristic, some specific difference. We have to be able to distinguish the positive unity of being, which makes it a thing. For the salt, the tasting is, as a general rule, infallible, But the method of perceptual recognition need not involve the dissolution of the thing. People used to bite gold coins. The immediate truth of sense certainty is present negatively in this concept of the truth of perception. The universality is a sensible one, and we take it directly from sensation. In order to take the truth about the salt, we must taste it, and the sample that we actually taste disappears into the immediately sense-certain taste of salt. After that, like all sense certainty, it's gone forever into what was but is not. Again, sometimes if you read Harris, it's sort of, I think it's just a difficult Hegel, and you know, like biting gold coins, I don't know what that's about, but anyway. 117. The object that I take up presents itself as purely one. I am also cognizant, this is Hegel now, I'm also cognizant of the property in it, which is universal, but as a result I go beyond that singularity. The first being the objective essence as a one was thus not its true being. So perception, it's forced to account for the two aspects of the thing, its oneness and its manyness, the many properties it's got. So what is causing the problem is that it needs both. It needs some idea of singularity, and it needs the fact that it contains many properties. So perception discovers that objects are made up of properties, but we know that this won't answer the problem. It just generates a bigger problem. 119. At first, I view the thing as one, and I have to hold it fast to it in its true determination. If in the movement of perceiving there is something which comes up which contradicts that perceiving, then this is to be cognized as my reflection. Now, in perception, various properties turn up that seem to be properties of things. Yet the thing is one, and we ourselves are conscious of this diversity through which it ceases to be one, as falling within us. The thing is therefore, in fact, only white as it is brought to our eyes. It's also tart to our tongues, and also cubical to our feel, etc. We do not take the entire diversity of these aspects from the thing, but from ourselves. To us, they come undone from each other in this way, because the eye is quite distinct from the tongue and so on. So again, he's starting to now use the senses. He's starting to use the human senses as being an important factor in particularity. So Hegel uses this idea of salt before. The many properties of salt are brought to me by my senses, sight, touch, smell, hearing, whatever. Is the one, is it in me or is it outside me? This is the problem of perception, as I said. Perception recognises that singular objects have multiple properties, and that the multiple properties are bound up with the singular object. So is it in me? Am I seeing the clouds? Am I making sense of them? Are they just there? So there's a film called, let me put it like this, The Perfect Getaway. So it's about this, it's set in Hawaii, and there's a couple who are stalking another couple. And this psycho couple, they believe, the guy who's the main killer, he believes that if you can only make sense of the world by looking at it. And when you turn away, like, Bishop Berkeley, well, maybe I'm doing Berkeley a disservice, but when you turn away, the world no longer exists, because what the world is the eye. So it's us making sense of the world. So anyway, that's the perfect getaway. Okay, so what makes objects coherent wholes? And not random entities that fly apart the moment we've turned our back. So in the film, he says to his girlfriend, when you turn away, it doesn't exist anymore. He's trying to convince her of his own, psycho ideas. So what makes the world make sense? What makes it not disappear when we turn away? Because if we're not holding it together. So what makes a lamp on a table not fall apart into multiple constituent elements? Imagine you haven't said that. If you and you do a DIY, then the lamp does actually fall apart into its multiple constituent elements, because I'm not very good at DIY. So perception on its own is not sufficient, because it doesn't answer these questions. As an explanatory model, which comes first, the one or the many? So what is their relationship? Is it in me, or are there laws outside there, the laws of nature that hold things together as ones. So Nancy Cartwright and I think it's John Dupree have an interesting take on the laws of nature, which we might come to, about scientific practice actually being more significant than laws, so-called laws that are out there. But the point is that Hegel's saying is it me or is it out there? So in order to solve the problem of the one, the many, and to solve the problems of perception, Hegel's got to move to yet another type of experience or another understanding, another, I should say, form of consciousness, force, or concept. We'll say form of force. Force and understanding is the next section. And let's hope the weather holds out as well for this next section, because it's getting windier and windier, so Hegel might have to go indoors, I'm afraid. Just to say last thing, so in my last video I was in full rant about Jeremy Corbyn representing the view from nowhere. And I think that Hegel is useful because, I'm ranting about that because he's useful because he doesn't posit a saviour or an outside to human experience or human institutions. It's basically, you know, it's us, it's only us. There ain't nobody here but us chickens, you know, we've got to save the human race. Nobody's going to save us. So I think last time I said he talked about let's bring the African Union. Let's bring this body in to create peace. So, you know, I take Corbyn to be like a Platonist, although he probably doesn't know it, because he thinks that there are these ideas. I mean, we've all got them to a certain extent, peace and justice, but he thinks these ideas, this idea of bringing peace from somewhere, someone will bring peace somewhere. These come from outside, so that's a Platonist view. That's the view, look, we can't solve these problems ourselves, but we've got to find someone else to do it. And that is a problem with like a lot of the modern left, and Corbyn exemplifies that. Okay, so less ranty this time, and next time on to force and understanding. Okay, thank you. See you later. Bye.